Thank you. So today we're going to talk about electronic nicotine delivery devices, which is not a term that anyone except people in public health use, right? You know them as e-cigs, you know them as vapes, or as Juuls, or as Blue, or as Sorin, or vape pens, or dab pens, or a whole different other names. All of those things fall into the category of what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about it from the perspective that you are a target of a marketing campaign, a very successful marketing campaign. I work for the Northern New England Poison Center. You may know it as Poison Control. It's an 800 number that you can call 24/7, 365 for information. 1-800-222-1222. On the very last slide, you'll have that number. You can also text the word poison to 85511 and initiate a text conversation, so if that's something you're more comfortable with. The Poison Center is a great resource for you. Some of you are probably babysitting, and the baby gets into something that you're a little worried about. They got some of diaper cream in their mouth, or you're working your summer job or your after-school job, and you get something in your eye, and you're a little worried that the chemical might be something like a cleaning product that you've gotten in your eye, and you're worried, should I go see the doctor about this? Using the Poison Center is a great resource to sort of determine whether or not something that's happened is a crisis, a problem, or not a problem. Obviously, when someone is unconscious or not breathing, that's when we call 911. But the nice thing about the Poison Center is that we connect to 911, 911 connects to us. So when EMTs have an incident involving a poisoning, they can get us on the line as they're transporting a patient to the hospital. So as I said, it's a 24/7 resource. It's also confidential in the way that talking to your doctor is confidential. So if you have questions about a substance that you're hearing about or an activity that you're hearing about, and you know you can look it up online, and if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? But if you're worried that the information you're getting is kind of sketchy, then the Poison Center can be a great place to call to get valid information. For parents, we sometimes get calls about things like, I found a pill in my daughter's room and I don't know what it is. And we can often identify that pill for them. Or I accidentally took my morning medicine and my nighttime medicine at the same time because I forgot that I had taken one of them. Or I accidentally took my husband's medicine. Or the dog got into something. Because we do pet calls as well. I have a black lab. They are like the frequent flyer of the Poison Center because they'll eat anything. But what we're going to talk about today is e-cigarettes. So back in the day, there were movie stars, and movie stars often smoked during their in their off time, and they smoked on screen, traditional cigarettes, because it was part of their character. And it was also such a common thing among the general public. You've got John Wayne, everyone's favorite cowboy or soldier. He died of stomach cancer associated with his smoking habit. You've got Yul Brynner in the bottom, who was The King and I. He was also one of the Magnificent Seven cowboy movie. He developed lung cancer and was very committed to talking about the cost of cigarette smoking on his health before he died. The top picture is Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. They were lovers on screen. They were married off screen. Humphrey Bogart actually died of throat cancer associated with his smoking habit. And she sat by his bedside during his illness. She was a smoker as well. And after he died, she continued to smoke. And she talked about what a tool it was for her as an actress. She would snap open a cigarette case, take out a cigarette, tap it, hold it to her lips and wait for him to light it, and he would. Take a long drag, blow it out in his face, and women in the audience would just clutch their pearls. Oh my God, because it was such a sophisticated, mysterious sort of thing. It made her seem so mature and so mysterious. And it was a real tool for her as an actress. There were also a whole series of ads which created a mystique around smoking, right? The Marlboro Man coming off the trail after a long, dusty ride. 3 of the models that posed for those print ads died of lung cancer. Not to be left out, you've got the camel guy on Take Your Tire to Work Day or something. And of course, he was so macho, they even created a cartoon character, right? Joe Camel, to help sell their product until the government said, whoa, whoa, cartoon characters, you're marketing to kids, and that's not legal. So we're going to fine you a couple $1 million, and we're going to use that $1 million, that money, for prevention education, which they did. Not to be left out, there were also ads for the ladies. So you had the Virginia Slims ads, which always had her in some gorgeous outfit or some really empowering or women's lib kind of outfit. And you had Eve, a pretty cigarette just for her. Some cigarettes even had a red band instead of a tan band around the filter so it wouldn't show lipstick marks, right? If you go even further back, you see ads like these. Mama, before you scold me, maybe you'd better light up a Marlboro. Now you know enough about cigarette smoking to know that not only was it not healthy, but not healthy even for secondhand exposure, right? We should never smoke when we're pregnant. We should never smoke around children. We shouldn't smoke around other people. That's why we've limited the places that we can smoke cigarettes, because even secondhand exposure is so dangerous. But during this period, you'd even see ads of a man in a white lab coat saying, after a long day of seeing patients, nothing soothes my throat like a menthol cigarette, which would imply that not only was it safe, but it was recommended by 4 out of 5 doctors, right? This was all taking place even after the cigarette companies knew what we as the general public didn't know, that their customers were dying, and they were dying due to illnesses likely caused by their product. But eventually, we caught on, we being the public health industry and the medical industry. We made the association between this activity and these illnesses, because nobody gets cancer from their first cigarette, right? It takes time for these diseases to develop, whether it's lung disease or cancers or other types of heart disease, all of which are associated with smoking. Eventually, however, we figured out what they already knew, and we did some counter marketing. So you may have seen some of these ads. That's Terry in both of the top pictures there. She died shortly after that second campaign was filmed, but she was very committed to talking about the toll that cigarette smoking had taken on her body. And this fellow down here starts off with a full mouthful of teeth and then takes out his dentures to talk about the oral cancers and the problems that he's experienced because of his smoking habit. And these are pretty effective. We did a lot of education on cigarette smoking. Not that it was not just paper wrapped around tobacco leaves, but that there were a whole bunch of ingredients and technologies that were engineered into this product to make it less irritating on the throat, to make it burn more slowly, to make it taste better. A lot of the things, the characteristics that are so popular in electronic devices, right? Clearly, those ingredients are pretty toxic, but the one that was most important was nicotine, because nicotine was the addictive chemical that brought you back to buy another pack of cigarettes. We also did education on things like the healthy lung versus the smoker's lung, right? Now, you probably haven't seen those videos very much, but I know the older people in the room probably remember seeing those as part of their education. We talked about how smoking left film on your teeth and your clothing and your hair, and it made you smell bad. And that it wasn't just about lung cancer, but it was about a whole bunch of body systems that were affected by these chemicals. Whether it was heart disease, whether it was reproductive illness, whether it was brain illness, a whole bunch of body systems were affected by these chemicals. And this strategy worked really well. We did 3 things, really. We educated, we legislated, and we taxed this product. And as a result, that green line is adult smokers. From 1962 to about 2017, 2018, that green line is a decrease in adult smokers. And we did this through things like, I mentioned education, those are the pieces we just talked about, but legislation. It used to be you could buy cigarettes at 16. How many of the adults in the room had a smoking area at their high school? Absolutely. You pull up at my high school, you'd see 200 kids standing outside in the first part of the morning having their first cigarette. You'd see 10 teachers out there and probably the vice principal all having their morning smoke. You used to be able to buy cigarettes in a machine in the lobby of a restaurant. Parents would say, honey, go get mama a pack of cigarettes. Here's some change. Go, you know which ones I want. and kids would run out there and put the coins in, pull a little plunger, and out would come a pack of cigarettes. But we changed those rules. We raised the age to 18 and 21 in many places. We made you go face to face with someone, a clerk in a store, to actually prove you were of legal age to buy cigarettes. And if they sold to you underage, they'd get fined or lose their license, right, to sell. We also taxed cigarettes, so the price went up and it became prohibitive. A lot of people just got tired of spending that kind of money on this product. And those things worked, as you can see. Now the blue line is teens. We didn't really even start talking about teen smokers until the mid-90s. That's when we started actually measuring. And you see there's a bump there. I'm not sure if that bump is because there were actually more teen smokers at that time, or if it was how we were asking the question or who we were asking the question of. So before, when I said we're going to talk about electronic nicotine delivery devices, it's important how we ask the question, because if we don't use the terms that you recognize, we don't get the right answers. Have you used an electronic nicotine delivery device in the last 30 days? No. Do you vape? Well, yeah, I vape. Ah, okay. So we've changed those survey questions, so now they say things like, do you use an electronic nicotine delivery device or an e-cigarette such as Juul or Vuse or Blue or Candy Pen or Vape? And when we use those words, we get a much different answer from teens and a much higher number of people reporting that they use them. But even among teens, we saw that smoking, traditional smoking, was dropping. So all of those blue lines represent traditional tobacco products, pipes, hookahs, chewing tobacco, smoking, cigars. The red line is Juul, is actually e-cigarettes. And while they were introduced in roughly 2010, they didn't really take off until about 2014, 2015. 2015 is when Juul was introduced. Now there's a drop there, and that's when we weren't asking the question the same way. When we started asking the question with those other terms, the number went way up. And that's partly because the popularity of Juul, when Juuling actually becomes a verb, right? Juul came out in 2015. In 3 years, they became a $16 billion company out of your pockets. That's faster growth than Amazon, than Apple, than Google. 3 years, $16 billion. When we ask teens what they think they're vaping, about 50% tell us, yeah, it's just flavored liquid. I don't use the stuff that has any nicotine in it. There are 15,000 different vape products. Can I tell you the percentage of products that have low or zero nicotine? It's very low, because there's no reason for them to make that product. They want there to be nicotine because nicotine is what brings the customers back. In fact, if you vape using a Juul device, Juul doesn't make a zero nicotine. They make among the higher end of nicotine concentration, because they never intended their device to be something to help people quit smoking. They want it to be a replacement device, and they wanted it to be satisfying to smokers. So they made it with a high concentration, so somebody who was a cigarette smoker would find it satisfying. Their high, their normal, their starting point was 50 milligrams per milliliter. Now it says 5% on the packaging, which looks low, but that turns out to be 50 milligrams per milliliter. Their low version is 30 milligrams per milliliter. And I know you can buy knockoff pods for Juul. I know it's like Keurig, right? It's like coffee pods. You can find all kinds of pods that will fit, and they have all kinds of stuff in them. Whether it's traditional e-juice with just nicotine, whether it's different flavors, whether it's THC, whether it's CBD oil, plenty of different products. The jump that we've seen is not just among high school students, it's among middle school students as well. 48% increase in middle school students from 2017 to 2018. These are your younger siblings. If you're someone who vapes, is this something that you would recommend to a younger brother or sister? Probably not. Because whether you've realized that you can't do without it, or it's costing you a ton of money, or you're getting in trouble and you're lying to your parents and you're facing suspensions or you're facing detentions for using it, or it's just a pain, it's probably not something you would recommend. But you're modeling this behavior for them. And that's why we're seeing such a jump. Now, I showed you magazine ads before, but I know that you really don't look at magazines much. You haven't looked at magazines since you were 5 in the dentist's office reading highlights, right? You get your information from social media, and that's where Juul went to market. They didn't bother with print ads. They didn't bother with billboards, except for one really nice one in Times Square. They went right to social media, and they let you do their marketing. So whether it was watching vape tricks, cloud chasing, all those kinds of blow it into a bottle and pour it out in circles inside circles, it looks like a circus act. Or these guys here, hotboxing, right? You fill the car, you roll the windows up and fill the car with as much vape as you can. Some people won't vape in their cars because it leaves a sticky residue on the inside of the windshield or on the dash, but they're not thinking about the sticky residue that it's leaving in your lungs. The other place we find that residue is on car seats, which means the little monkeys in the car seats are putting their hands all over that surface, and then of course they put them in their mouths, right? Now, is it enough to be acutely toxic, that is, make them sick right away? Probably not. But just like we didn't realize that secondhand smoke could make people sick, we're going to have to wait to see what effect that daily contact with this stuff is going to have on those little kids in those car seats. We find that social media was the place where you shared the information for Juul. You did their marketing. I said we have about 20% of teens that are reporting using Juuls, right? That's 1 in 5. Now that means that 4 out of 5 of you are not using them. But we don't see that behavior, right? If you post a video of yourself vaping in your room, #sorrymom, that gets seen and shared, right? Nobody posts a video of themselves sitting in their room not vaping. Why would you bother, right? So by showing those videos, by showing that activity, by sharing and liking that activity, you guys did the marketing for them. And that's where they went by showing social influencers, people who looked barely 21, but talked about and used and demonstrated this product as something fun and safe and not at all, bad for your health because it wasn't like you were smoking. None of that turns out to be necessarily true. Now, if you have an adult in your life who's gone from smoking cigarettes to vaping, yay them. Because for that person, it probably is less harmful. Probably because we don't know what the final result, the verdict is going to be as to whether or not these are harmful, and less harmful but still harmful because we know we're seeing illnesses, we're seeing the consequences of this kind of exposure. So for them, for an adult who was a smoker, it is probably a safer alternative. But for 4 million teens who were not smokers and who have taken up using this, it is just an introduction to addiction, and the cigarette companies could not be happier because many of them back these products. Altria just bought 30% of their stock in vape, in Pax, the company that makes Juul, because they know what a great business model this is. They know that if they can get you addicted to nicotine in your teens, they will have you as a customer for the rest of your life one way or another, through one product or another. And we have a whole new series of influencers, right? Just like in the old days when we had the movie stars and celebrities who modeled this behavior and made it seem cool. Whether it's Leo DiCaprio sitting at the Golden Globes vaping, or Jack Black, or everyone's favorite pirate, and not to be left out, Jenny McCarthy for the ladies, a spokesperson for Blue, right? Wrong way. There we go. So what do we know about nicotine and nicotine products? Well, a traditional cigarette's got about 10 milligrams of nicotine. But you don't get all of that, right? Because some of it burns off as ash. Some of it just you maybe inhale, but you don't absorb it as well. When we talk about gum or lozenges that people use to quit smoking, or the patch, which are products that release a small amount of nicotine to help you fight off the craving to light a cigarette. All right, small amounts of nicotine, but over a long period of time. When it comes to e-cigarettes, it's all about the juice. And the juices range from 0 to, I've seen 70 milligram per milliliter pods in some of the vape shops that I've gone into. So they can be about anywhere. And it's the other ingredients that we're worried about as well. Are these smoking cessation devices? Well, as I mentioned, people who switch from cigarettes to e-cigarettes, it's probably a less harmful alternative, but we noticed that over time, a year later, they're still vaping. They haven't quit using nicotine, they've just changed what nicotine device they use. And maybe they're not getting some of those other toxins, but we don't know what the effect of the ingredients that they are getting are going to have on lung tissue. There are no rules about the juices or about the devices. Teddy bears have 10 different standards that they have to make in order to make sure that the eye doesn't pop off and choke a toddler, so they're suitable for children under the age of 3. These devices don't have any safety standards, which is why most of you have seen videos of them catching fire in someone's pocket, right? As if fire in this region of the body was not enough of a deterrent to not use them. But there are no safety standards, and there's no safety standards on the juices either, which means that you can compare bottle A and bottle B, and if they have the same label on them, they may have very different content because there's no rules in that industry to make them have to verify what they've got. This is a fad like bottle flipping and finger spinners and that thing that you do. I'm not even going there. But the problem is when this fad is over, when you are tired of getting suspended, when you are tired of lying to your parents, when you are tired of spending money on this, even if we collect up all of the vapes and we have a bonfire in the back of the building, we still have to deal with, we now have a group of students, a whole generation of students that are addicted to nicotine. And we're going to have to help you with that because nicotine withdrawal is a thing, because nicotine addiction is a thing. And it's more problematic for you than it is for adults. We know that nicotine is a stimulant. Some people use it to get themselves going in the morning, some people need it to relax, but either way, it's a stimulant and a relaxant. It's a drug that affects how your brain works. When I get a new phone, it takes me 2 videos, a manual, and my daughter to teach me how to use it. You get a new phone, you have mastered it in 5 minutes, right? Because your brains are still making connections. They're still learning things, they're still making these synapses and these connections and how impulses and decisions are made. If you introduce a chemical, an addictive chemical like nicotine, while those connections are still being formed, it will change your factory settings. It will change your default settings for how you respond to impulse, how you respond to motivation and things like decision making permanently, and will put you at greater risk for other addictive behaviors later on. I know it stinks to have someone say to you, please wait till you're at least 21 to do stupid things, because your brain will be more fully complete in development at that time. But the fact is, this is why the nicotine companies target you, because they know if they can introduce this addictive chemical into your brain at this stage, it'll have a much longer impact than it will for 21 and 25 and 30-year-olds. So that's why you've been a target market of this campaign. We also know that it has reinforcing behavior. So nicotine releases dopamine in your brain. Dopamine is our feel-good chemical, the one that gets released when we see a good movie or have a good meal or get a hug from that special person. Dopamine is that chemical that says, oh, that was nice. Unfortunately, those things release this amount of dopamine. Nicotine releases this amount of dopamine. And because you build up a tolerance to it, over time it takes you more and more nicotine more frequently to get that dopamine release. And when you quit, often those things that used to release dopamine don't compare to the feeling that you used to get. Which is why anyone in here who was a smoker before, any of the adults that were a smoker before will tell you it could be 20 years since their last cigarette. But there are still times when they crave a cigarette, whether it's because they're in a situation that they used to smoke in before, like a stressful situation, or a social situation where they're with people who are smokers and they smell it and it's still, wow. And that's the same kind of effect that it has on you. You try to quit, you're doing good, you're hanging around someone who's vaping, you smell it, and it triggers that dopamine craving again. So it's very hard to quit. That's why adults, it takes them on average 8 to 10 tries to quit smoking. And that's using the patches and the gums and the behavioral training that goes along with those kinds of products. Now we can use those patches and gums on some of you because you are adult size and adult metabolism. But think about the kids that are coming in for the next session, some of whom haven't gone through puberty yet and have the metabolism of a rabbit, right? We're not going to be able to use those products on them. They're going to have to go cold turkey, and it's going to be very hard for them to get over that addiction. And it's something that, like most addictions, they will fight for the rest of their lives because that's how it works. When you have to go without nicotine, and some of you may be familiar with this, you've gone on vacation with your family and you can't vape as much as you like to, or you are in a situation like school where you can't vape as often as you do at home. And you may feel some of these things: anxiety, irritability, tremors, racing heart, insomnia, drowsiness, difficulty concentrating. These are all symptoms of nicotine withdrawal. Now imagine if 1 in 5 kids in your class are going through this on a regular basis. This is what your teacher has to deal with. This is what you have to deal with as far as your classmates. It can be very distracting, not just for them, but for you as well. So I often go into vape shops. It's a weird job that I have, I admit, because I need to see what's new. So I go into a shop and this guy's got a display. And I look at it and I said, this is nice. You know, you've got the high concentrations at the bottom and 0 at the top. So if you wanted to wean yourself off of your addiction, you could start at a high concentration and then you could slowly reduce until you'd gotten down to 0. We haven't a lot of evidence that that's how people actually use this, but it's a possibility. You notice his high concentration is 24 milligrams per milliliter. I told you that Juul's low version is 30 milligrams per milliliter, and their normal is 50. So remember that. Now I asked the guy, wow, this is a nice setup. Where do you get your stuff from? Well, you know, you can order it online, he said, but I don't trust that, so I make this stuff myself. Really? I'm thinking, what's your background? Chemistry, pharmacy, maybe? So I asked him, what's your background? Well, I used to run the copy center at Staples, and before that I sold refrigerators at Best Buy. But now I have my own business. And he was very proud of himself for being an entrepreneur, and I respect that. But I'm not letting this guy bake me a cake, let alone whip up something in his Easy Bake Oven that I'm going to suck into my lungs, okay? And the flavors that he had, they were great. Strawberry cheesecake, chocolate pudding, cotton candy, bubble gum. Who exactly do you think we are marketing to when we package things to look like candy flavors and fun, safe flavors? I don't see the Marlboro man climbing off his Harley at the end of a long ride saying, man, I could really go for a birthday cake vape right now. Clearly, this is marketed to you to make it seem fun and safe, right? There are a lot of other ingredients besides nicotine. Diacetyl is one ingredient. Diacetyl is a buttery flavoring. It's used in lots of foods. It's used in lots of alcohols. It's a perfectly digestible buttery flavoring. Digestible, meaning it's food safe. And workers would spray it on popcorn kernels as they're being packaged for microwave popcorn. Unfortunately, once it cooks in the popcorn, it's fine. But when it's in the air and the workers are breathing it in, some of them would actually develop lung disease because it would make the delicate fibers in their lungs gunk up. And it would develop something called bronchiolitis obliterans, or popcorn lung. Now this is fairly rare, and it's been resolved by making those workers now have to wear masks when they're spraying this stuff. The ones that got ill remained ill. This is a chronic illness. They will not get better from that illness. They will treat it, but they will not get better from it, like emphysema, like chronic bronchitis. Just one of many ingredients that may be food safe, but are not necessarily lung safe. Thank you for coughing on cue. So I'll give you an example. I know that it's perfectly safe to drink Hershey's chocolate syrup. I have tested this, okay, myself. But if I turn that into a vapor and I inhale it, I have no idea if that's lung safe. You know enough from biology class that your digestive system and your respiratory system are very different environments, right? Think of it this way. If I take a bottle of maple syrup and I squeeze it into a washing machine, slam the door, turn the washing machine on, eventually it's going to flush out of that system. But if I squeeze that bottle of maple syrup into an air conditioner, it doesn't have a means to flush that out. And it's going to affect how that device works because it's meant to process air. The ingredients in these juices include things like propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, which are ingredients that we find in antifreeze. But propylene glycol is also a food-grade sweetener. It's got a very sweet smell and sweet taste to it, which is why when you spill antifreeze on the floor of your garage, the dog wants to lick it up because it's sweet. And then you would call 1-800-222-1222, shameless plug, for the Poison Center. There are a bunch of other ingredients that we've seen, and some of them are metals, and some of them are chemicals that we know are in traditional cigarettes and that cause disease. But again, there's no regulation on these products. Now, you may have seen in the news that there is a vaping-related lung illness that has been diagnosed. This slide says 1,300. That slide is a week old. The number is now 1,604 cases in every state except Alaska, and 36 deaths. Age range from 17 to 75 years old. About 30% of the patients are under the age of 21. And while it was initially thought this was only related to juices that contain THC, only about 60 of the cases actually involve THC juice, that is a marijuana-based juice. The other 40% involve nicotine-based juices, so not marijuana juices. We cannot identify any particular product that is a device or any particular juice that this is associated with. But it should be no surprise that we are seeing lung disease eventually as a result of using this product. We did not see lung disease, we did not recognize lung disease associated with smoking cigarettes for a long time. These devices have been around for a while. We are now identifying vaping-associated lung illnesses, and we are seeing deaths. And we're seeing it not just in older people who may already have respiratory conditions or other illnesses, but in young people who started off perfectly healthy. So, these devices come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, right? From things that looked like cigarettes to things that looked like pens that mom and dad would definitely not recognize, to fancier devices, to box mods, to if you've got your man bun devices. It was very subtle, very easy to hide, very easy to charge right on the back of your Chromebook and your teachers wouldn't even know. So this was an easy device to hide, very popular within price range. Here's their big ad, right? This is the big ad they had in Times Square. Again, who are we marketing to? What we don't know is the long-term consequences because it's hard to test. We have an entire generation of lab rats. You have donated your bodies to science. We will be following you for the next 30 years to find out what the long-term effects are. Is this more dangerous for you than it is for adults? Yes, because I talked about where you are in brain development. That's just the way it is. There are resources, and in fact, all of these resources are on a document that I've provided for the school that they'll be able to share with you on the website, on the school website, that they'll be able to share with your families. So you can talk about this with mom and dad, you can talk about it with your school counselor, with your pediatrician if you need to. Whether it's truth.com or other ways to quit, smokefree.gov, which has specific programs for teens, My Life, My Quit, there's phone apps that will help you quit. There's Breathe New Hampshire, and of course there's the Poison Center. Here's the contact information for the Poison Center. If we can be a resource for you, please don't hesitate to ask, okay? But this is the kind of support that we want you to have so that you can make decisions on where you're going to introduce addictive chemicals into your body, whether or not you're going to do that, and if you've already started, how you're going to get off them, okay? Thank you very much. You have been very respectful. I appreciate it.